A baby falling and the birth of my self-sabotage. I was holding the door open at the top of the basement steps. I did this every day to excitedly welcome my dad home from work. The house was quiet in that calm, ordinary, suburban kind of way. I was 3 years old. My mother was in the kitchen starting dinner. I already felt responsible, capable, and helpful because I was an older sister. My hand on the basement door, looking for my dad to appear. Suddenly, without warning or a moment to react, my 8-month-old baby sister came flying across the floor in one of those walker things and went right under my arm, through the open door, and fell down 13 concrete steps. I watched as she bounced between the wall and the railing like a bowling ball. It was like watching a movie in slow motion. My father dropped his briefcase and ran to the bottom of the stairs as my mom rushed past me from the top of the steps, screaming and yelling to get to the baby. I remember the sounds of the screams and the cries. I froze, standing there holding the door open, watching the chaos and terror unfold beneath me on the stairs. Mom ran up the stairs, blowing past me while holding the baby. She and my sister were both screaming and crying. My dad followed right behind them. Let me back up for a minute. My early life was idyllic as could be. More to come on the later years. But I had a present, loving, safe, 2-parent household. We were comfortable middle class, and I was protected and loved with lots of family and friends close by. But in this one instant, I was alone, frozen, terrified, watching a scene unfold that would eventually drive a large portion of my life. I immediately believed everything was my fault. Did I kill my sister? What must have felt like a lifetime holding that door open. In reality, it was only a few minutes before they realized the baby was going to be just fine. They hugged me, they consoled me, they told me it wasn't my fault. I didn't believe them. The whole incident would become a defining moment for my life and work that took over 40 years for me to unpack. That momentary scenario created an unconscious story that anchored my brain and belief system. The belief became, any time I open a door, literally and figuratively, bad things happen to me and others. It became the root cause of a lifetime of what I call my own peak and plummet cycle. I could get into big rooms, I could accomplish things personally and professionally, up to a point. Then I'd do something and it would all come crashing down. I first came to realize there may be something inside of me that was causing this cycle. I saw it wasn't just bad luck. Instead, it was what author Gay Hendricks calls an upper limit problem in his fantastic book, The Big Leap. Having an upper limit problem means we have an internal thermostat that heats up when we don't feel safe or have guilt or shame. Exceeding a comfortable level of that thermostat means we're unconsciously sabotaging ourselves to return to what feels familiar and safe, especially if we haven't learned how to regulate our nervous systems. Through many years of deep inner work and trauma healing journey, I learned that the basement steps incident was an embedded wound that became exiled inside the 3-year-old part of me that I now call Curly. I named that inner part of me Curly because of the defining characteristic at that age, my big, thick, curly hair. Seeing the wound Curly was carrying allowed the adult, self version of me to better understand when and why the freeze response showed up in various areas of my life and work. When I would get to certain levels, my personal upper limit, the unconscious Curly part would take center stage with my belief system that says, freeze, don't open that door. You will get hurt. You will hurt others. Stay put. That's the safe thing to do. My personal and professional life operated by believing that opening doors is dangerous. Progress is dangerous. Movement is dangerous. I learned how to meet and heal these parts through the work of Dr. Dick Schwartz and his IFS, Internal Family Systems, approach to healing inner wounds. I worked to move protective layers, in other words, my freeze response, out of my way enough so I could unburden that wound and reprogram my belief systems. The 5 trauma responses that shape leadership. Even with techniques like IFS, we must understand where true self-healing starts. We've all been taught in 8th grade science class about the fight and flight responses, but there are actually 5 primary trauma responses, and they're not abstract psychological terms. They're operating systems. First, we have fight, which is about control and dominance. Flight, how to avoid and disappear. Freeze, how to become anchored and stunned. Fawn, people-pleasing and caregiving. Faint, when we dissociate and our body shuts down. Here's how it plays out for me in different embedded wounds. I fight when I'm backed into a corner by not being seen or heard. I flight by drowning myself in busy work to outrun fear. I freeze by delaying launching something that felt too visible. I fawn by softening my voice to avoid conflict. I faint when my body gets overwhelmed and dissociated. These are not character flaws. They are intelligent survival adaptations. But they don't have to be our forever states of being. When I look at my own story, I see how each one played a role at various ages, stages, and scenarios in my life. I learned how to make the unconscious conscious and become aware of when I resorted to one of the 5 responses. Unburdening each part of me that was anchored by a particular trauma response gave me the ability to heal those parts and move forward with more autonomy, permission, and freedom to elevate in my life and work. And here's the most important truth I've learned. Self-leadership is not about eliminating these parts. It's about learning how to work with them. That's how Living Oak Leadership was born. The irony is that my business, Living Oak Leadership, was not created from my ambition. It was created from my survival. Living Oak Leadership uses the metaphor of how a strong, powerful oak tree looks on the outside, but when cutting a cross-section of its trunk, you see everything that ever impacted the growth of that tree. For over 3 decades, I worked in executive search, leadership advisory, and human capital strategy. I coached thousands of leaders. I helped CEOs articulate their vision. I guided boards through succession. I assessed executive presence and performance. On paper, I was operating in the top tier of my industry. But internally, I was still holding doors shut. Now I knew why I was. It became clear I needed to build a framework that would help my leadership clients and others learn how to unburden and heal their own imprinted wounds. Inner wounds don't always have to happen from big T-type traumas or terrible childhoods. Any wound can get embedded by what we generationally inherit, events that happen directly to us, and how we perceive the world or family around us. But we have the ability and the permission as an embodied self to heal and reprogram how we operate. Without this work, we can't fully embody true leadership, which is the foundation of becoming a conscious leader that can truly impact the way we desire. We have not been taught how. For generations, children have been raised without much knowledge of how, or being properly allowed, to express and release their emotions in the moment. So we found ways to protect and survive in order to thrive, just like an oak tree does. My business was born at the intersection of wound healing, consciousness, and self-leadership by blending various frameworks, approaches, and spiritual somatic work. Are you ready to learn more about Living Oak Leadership and how to become the leader you're meant to be? Then stay tuned for the next installments in this series. It's the story of another one of my parts and how we learned how to start using my voice. If you want support and an amazing community of other self-leaders, come join us in the Living Oak Leadership School community. Click in the link below to join. Love to have you there.